Sept Medicaid expansion funding. We need to do that. I hope everyone supports that when it comes up. Our governor has not supported it, although 31 states have. He has said the reason he isn't supporting it is because by 2020, we have to pick up 10% of the tab. Well, the studies are already out on the 31 states that have, and the return on every dollar that we receive is between $1.35 and $1.85. The return on that is phenomenal. We have a governor that cites Vermont as the state that is reacting best to the opioid crisis, and he's right about that. What he's not stating is that they use the Medicaid expansion funds to do it. They set up a hub and spoke approach with access to care that is responsive, that isn't just treating it like he is, like we can arrest our way out of this problem. It's treating it as a chronic illness. It's treating it as an addiction. It's getting the care that people need. And that's what we need to have as an approach here in the state of Maine. This is something that's ravaging every single community. In my hometown of Sanford, we had 3 overdoses within 24 hours. And it's not just in lower income communities like mine. It's happening in Falmouth, Cape Elizabeth, everywhere. We need to hit this issue and we need to address it straight up. Thank you.
Diane Russell.
Thank you. So obviously, I think everyone here supports question 2. I know Mark and Jim and I tried very hard to pass that in the legislature and couldn't get over the governor's veto. I just think we need a Medicare for all system. You know, the debate that we have seen has proven once and for all that trying to operate within the private sector isn't going to work. And you know, you got to get money not just out of politics. I'd like to get money out of my doctor's office. Little, you know, minor detail. And you know, the path to doing this is making sure that we, you know, get rid of these huge premiums and huge deductibles. You know, at this point, insurance looks very much like bankruptcy insurance, not health insurance. There's no health in health insurance anymore. How many people here have health insurance and then you go to the doctor and you still don't know what bill you're going to get? There's no transparency and the accountability. When you go buy a car, do you drive off the lot wondering what you're going to pay? God, no. But when you walk into the doctor's office or the hospital, you do the exact same thing, and you have no idea. You sit there waiting, wondering what the surprise envelope's going to tell you. Did you win the lottery or didn't you, right? Or did you go bankrupt? So I just think it's time to get the private sector, in terms of like the profit motives, out of healthcare, move to a single-payer healthcare system. And here's the thing. Maine people twice this summer protected healthcare for people all across the country. If there is any state in the union that is ready and organized to bring single-payer healthcare and Medicare for all to this state, it is Maine.
Jim Boyle.
Well, I believe that question 2 is going to pass, but in the event that it doesn't, one of the first things I will pass is effectively a Maine Care expansion here in Maine. And I, as Diane said, I worked hard in the Senate to try to override the vetoes of the governor. We came within 1 vote. It's the bill that I worked hardest on, all of us. I really feel like, at least the time that I was in the Senate, it was the most important thing that we could do for those 70,000 Mainers that we all know could have been covered. As a business owner, if you offer me $10 for every dollar I put out, I'm gonna take that offer every time. And I made that argument for some reason, and I still can't fathom, they wouldn't take the $10 of free money. And it's out there. So, you know, 500, at that time it was more than 500 million a year. Now it's still in the neighborhood of the numbers I see, 500 million a year of money that comes to Maine, which would support something like 4,000 high-paying healthcare jobs in our state, and more importantly, take care of a much larger percentage, or a larger percentage of people who need coverage. And the other argument I made is, well, guess what? You spread the premium costs out over younger, healthier people. It saves money for older, sicker people like me. And so that's the first and most important thing that I think we can do, is if it doesn't get passed here at the ballot. And then we need to do more with medication-assisted treatment in community health centers and all throughout the state. And we need everybody who wants it, every police department, every municipality who wants Narcan, or not even if they want it. They should have it even if they don't want it. I want them to have it as governor.
Betsy Sweet.
I I think we do all support Yes on 2. I've worked on it for the last 10 years to make sure that we expand healthcare. It's a thing I've been working on for 35 years at the State House. So I think we absolutely need a Medicare for all, single-payer healthcare system. There's no question about it. So since I think most of us agree on that here, we have to start to address the cost of healthcare. Prescription drug costs here in Maine and the country are ridiculous. And they are not because that's the cost of the drug, it's because we have allowed it. And we look at prevention, primary care and prevention, which is the thing that we should most do, because that is how we're going to control costs of medical costs. It's how public health, we've decimated our public health system. Those prevention things, controlling obesity and diabetes and getting exercise and eating good foods and all those education things that help us control costs when we finally do cover it as a single payer system, those have been decimated. And we have got to get back to that. And I think, we already do, people say, oh, single payer is so hard. We already have it. We have it for Medicare for people over 65, and we have it for Medicaid for people who are low income. It's only us chumps in the middle who pay for it. So it is time for that, and we have got to, as we have said, the opioid crisis, we have to deal with the medical issue of it. We are not going to arrest our way out of it, but we have to realize that so much of it started as a prescription drug issue. And the pain might have started physical, but we have to start looking at the emotional pain that people have, how disconnected we are from each other. We need to start paying attention to our sense of community and why people go there in the first place. And I think that's a conversation we have to have, and that starts with leadership at the top, respecting and caring about every single person in Maine. And I will say again, not to be a broken record, we will never make progress on this issue until we get money out of politics, because I want to pass question 2, but just like every other referendum we passed last year, when it goes into the legislature and they have to fund it, you watch what's going to happen with big money, no matter how much we pass it, and I think we should pass it. You watch what happens. Big money comes in and they change it for them. And until we change who politicians listen to, who gets in the door, we are never going to have single-payer health care.
Mark Eves.
Well, thank you. And a lot's been talked about Medicaid expansion. I think it is one of the most significant things that we can do for our state. 70,000 Mainers are depending on us. And as you guys read the newspapers yesterday, 20,000 Mainers woke up to find out that Anthem was pulling out of the health insurance exchange. The problem is getting worse, not better. When I had an opportunity, the first bill that I sponsored in the Speaker's office was to expand Medicaid. Built a coalition of 150 different organizations that work together to get, as close as Jim said, 1 vote in the Senate and 2 in the House. And one of the most heartbreaking things for me was to be up at the rostrum on the day that we took that final vote. We got it to the governor's desk, he vetoed it, he came back. And I have to close the vote knowing what that meant. We were 2 votes short in the House. Not just the 70,000 Mainers that we're going to lose access to health care. That's the thing I think about first. It's also what it does to our economy, or for our economy. $1 million a day, $1 billion that we gave up out of principle, I guess. I mean, I don't know what again, it's hard to fathom. That is on day 1, immediately done. Because I think Betsy's right. It'll get passed at the polls, but not implemented at the legislature, and that's a shame. For me, as a healthcare practitioner, when I was working with families that were in trouble, that came to my practice, I saw a lot of people that didn't have any insurance, and we put them on a sliding scale fee, and some saw for nothing. Access to healthcare is critical, and this is a huge step forward. The second thing I gotta do is a Medicaid buy-in option on the exchange. More work needs to be done, but it's a march towards single payer. Single payer is the only way that we're gonna fix this whole problem. But a Medicaid buy-in system where if you make just a little bit over the income and you just get disqualified, you can't purchase. This is a way to compete with the private insurance companies. It will shut them down because they can't compete. And I think that's the right step in a march towards a single payer system, and that's something that I would fight for as governor.
Janet Mills.
Thanks. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. How do you believe we can best provide access to affordable treatment and health care for Mainers who are struggling with opioid addiction, mental illness, cancer, diabetes, or any other healthcare crisis?
Okay, thank you. and it was pretty generic. And obviously, we all agree that question 2 is vital. Question 2 doesn't answer the whole question, though. As Betsy mentioned, those of us in the middle may not be covered by Medicaid expansion to the extent of 138% of poverty level. There are a lot of people in the middle class and small businesses who still won't be covered, won't get health insurance. And because this president is threatening to withdraw the subsidies for health insurance companies under the ACA, and that's one reason Anthem is pulling out. So we've got to tackle that big question. On opioid abuse itself, the epidemic itself, I just wrote to the American insurance companies all over the country asking them to start paying for alternative methods of pain relief, chiropractic care, manipulations, exercise programs, diet programs, smoking cessation programs, the things that work, instead of just giving people a couple of pills and saying, here, take these, this will help, and then somebody a few months down the road gets addicted to those pills and then there's very little help for them, at least in the state of Maine. I've provided funds to Operation Hope in Scarborough and other places to help divert people who are desperately seeking help. How desperate can you be to go to a police department with your kids in tow, and I've seen this, looking for help, looking for treatment for substance abuse disorders. I've provided funds to the Health Equity Alliance, and I've been working with the Maine Medical Association, the pharmacists, the Maine Nurses Association, and other medical providers to make sure we get more medication-assisted treatment out there, buprenorphine, Vivitrol in the jails and elsewhere. And in every emergency room, there should be a substance abuse specialist, a peer counselor, and a MAT specialist to get people's lives turned around. So, and education and prevention obviously are big. In a minute and a half, that's it.
Thank you. Question 4, how can we best encourage and support young Mainers to stay in Maine and entice other young families to relocate to Maine? And Mark Eves.
Great. Thank you. I think the first thing you do is you give them a job and a reason to stay here. And one of the proudest programs that I was able to work with a whole host of folks on to implement was a logging training program in the northern part of the state. It is a program that came together. It's an unlikely story. It's a road trip that I took up to Frenchville and sat in a room with about 30 different loggers and people that were connected to the forest products industry. We had a good meeting, but I think they were a little skeptical of me. But we went back, and we went back again and again and again. And what we worked on together was bringing together a private-public partnership that started the first mechanized logging training program in the state. The first graduating class graduated on September 22nd, just a week ago. And I see some fans in the audience on that one. The reason why that is so important is because that allows our young kids to graduate with a certificate. After they graduate high school, they go through this program. They get hired by a logging contractor, and they can make $40,000 to $50,000 a year in a part of a state that's real money, that you can buy a home and stay in the state that you love. The only reason and the only way that that happened is that we showed up, we listened to those communities, and we wanted to develop a program that made sense for them. And again, for my opening remarks around showing up in communities, listening to people, and working hard and sticking with it until we get results is the way that I think we're going to start to turn our state around. That's one example of a handful around workforce development that I worked on in the Speaker's office, and it's one that I'm really proud of because it represents a hopeful future for young people to stay right here and an opportunity for others to move here as well.
Janet Mills.
Thank you. There are a lot of answers to that question. Among other things, we want to attract millennials and keep the millennials here, the people who are so invested in technology industries and telecommunications, and provide those good paying jobs, not just in the 1st District of Maine, but all over the state of Maine. I want to make sure that we improve our infrastructure, first of all, and our education system, because that brings people here to start their businesses here, and it keeps people here who want to live here. A good education system is fundamental. If you're going to bring a young family here or start a young family here, you want an equal educational opportunity, a good educational opportunity for all kids, whether they live in Cape Elizabeth or Fort Kent, anywhere in this state. And providing equal opportunities is vital to that. Protecting young people or encouraging them to come here and stay here and grow their families here means good paying jobs with health care, with benefits. That's what they're looking for. What I hear from people who are running around the state here, as I do, is young people want jobs that give them value, not just dollars and cents, but something they feel good about, something they can use to give back to their communities. And that means giving them jobs where they can increase resources for the whole community, where they can work on solar power, on renewable resources, where they can work in jobs and in environments that encourage those kinds of, the B corporations as they were. Jobs that give value, technology industry, telecommunications industry, infrastructure meaning not just roads and bridges, but cell phone coverage, broadband, and a lot of other stuff. He's cut me off.
Adam Cody.
Infrastructure, workforce training, education, definitely, but it's a bit more than that too, in my view. We have to stop doing a couple things in the state. First, we have to stop saying people are from away. My wife's been here over 20 years and people still say she's from away. I get it, that's part of the culture, but we gotta get over it. The second thing is we gotta stop saying we've never done it that way before. It is all about jobs. It's about creating opportunity for people. So yes, the paper companies have closed down, but you know what? Trees have been valuable commodities for thousands of years, and there are new sustainable practices, whether it's cross-laminated timber, wood-based biofuels, always gonna need toilet paper. It's finding those next products, right? I mean, there's 7 billion people in this world. We're in a pretty good spot. We're in a really good spot. And we gotta start recognizing that, appreciating that, start looking at what those jobs of the future would be. You get the craft brew industry booming in Maine, booming. Every county in this state, 80 new ones in the last 10 years. They're buying their hops, they're buying their barley from the Midwest, or they're buying them from Europe. You talk to farmers up in Aroostook County, that's a great rotational crop for potatoes. Why aren't they growing it more? Because we don't have the distribution, we don't have the manufacturing, we're not tying together what we can do. We need a governor that's gonna come out from the outside with some leadership. We need some change in our focus in Augusta, and we need to start looking at what we can do to provide for ourselves and create those jobs. Young people will stay, more will move here, and we'll start growing again.
Diane Russell.
Thank you. This is a great question. You know, as someone that grew up in Bryant Pond and remembers the crank phone, no, not the rotary dial, the actual crank phone. We were the last town in the country to have them. I can tell you, you're not going to bring Generation X folks back to Maine, which is my generation, or as we like to call it, the Oregon Trail generation. And you're sure as hell not going to bring the millennial generation to Maine or entice them to stay without real broadband. And we need to deploy broadband across the state. I think, you know, what Janet said about investing in K through 12, making sure that if you're going to come back for families is really important, which is, again, why repealing the 3% tax that was passed by people who are, you know, everyday voters was astonishing to me and pretty ridiculous, and it also wasn't very forward thinking. We need to restore that so we can invest in healthcare. We need to end the opioid crisis. You know, my generation is really suffering all across the state, and people are getting out. It's a big thing. You need to get out of town in order to be able to avoid this. And how are you going to entice people back if all anybody thinks about is getting out because they don't want to be wrapped up in it and they don't want to end up in that scenario? You know, when you go to dinner and all the topic of conversation is which son or which daughter of who passed away and how close they were to recovery and how they were doing a great job, and then suddenly, bam, they were gone. It's not a topic of conversation that our generation really wants to hear. We want to end the crisis, and we're tired of politicians not doing something about it and having all options on the table. You know, if you want to bring technology to the state, we have to, again, invest in broadband. Climate change is something that millennials really want to work on across the board. And when a Democrat was in the governor's office, John Baldacci, we were leading the country on climate change issues and energy. It was the fastest growing sector, and as soon as Paul LePage got into office, it stopped. And we had people coming from all across the country to settle here, and young people really wanted to get engaged in that. And you know, everybody in the room's gonna laugh, but we just legalized marijuana. Do you think millennials are going to want to come to Maine and do work? Or you think computer scientists are going to want to come to Maine? Hell yeah, they are. And we're going to create new jobs, and we're going to do it responsibly. And we're going to make sure that our children are protected, and we have a public health strategy. But we're going to treat adults like adults, and we're going to use that as a mechanism to entice people to come to settle here and also to stay and to have something, once again, to be proud of. Because this state has a lot of pride in it, and it's been stolen from us over the past 8 years.
Betsy Sweet.
When I ask young people about this, they say coffee and broadband. That's what we want to stay here. And I think everyone has said jobs, research and development. But I have an idea about when we get out of, when kids are in high school. That's when they're making decisions about what they might want to do, where they might want to be. So I think that we should offer every high school student in Maine a voluntary opportunity to spend a year after they graduate in community service, doing childcare, doing elder care, doing weatherization, doing teaching New Americans English. We have a lot of jobs that need to be done that aren't filled. And in exchange for that, they get 4 years of tuition at any Maine institution, not just the Maine University system or community college system, but we get Bates and Bowdoin and Thomas and UNE to play. They have endowments, they can do this. And then if they stay in Maine, that tuition stays free. And if they decide to leave, it just becomes a no-interest loan. So it's a way to entice people to stay, it's a way to get people interested, and it's also a way to teach our young people how to give back, so that we begin to build the kind of communities that people want to live in. People want to stay here because they want to know they love their communities. I wouldn't leave my neighborhood for anything. I have the best neighbors in the world. Some of them are sitting in this audience, and they came to this. It was nice for my birthday. But I think a way to give that, kids are, they're all looking at their phones. Siri and Alexa are our best friends. If we give them a year to give back and know what it's like to be part of a community and to give something and have value, I think we will keep our Maine people here. We also need a leader who is optimistic, who is innovative, who isn't afraid to try new ideas, who welcomes new people to this state, and who has fun.
Jim Boyle.
So I've lived and breathed this experience. You talk about leadership, so I want to talk a little about leadership, but I also want to talk briefly about policy. The main reason most people that I talk to either stay here or want to be here, there are two. One is the environmental quality that we have here that a lot of other places don't have: lower traffic, higher, better air, clean water, and the beauty of our coasts and our inlands and our waterways, our fields and forests. And also, just the quality of the people here, some people call it slower pace of life. I just call it being respectful of one another and showing that we care about each other as a community. But there are policy things. One is, as has been discussed, some help with college repayment type programs. Second, more emphasis on community college programming for those who aren't going on to a bachelor's level. And third, which I don't think has been addressed, one of the other key reasons that young couples in particular that I've talked to who have either moved here already or are considering it is high quality preschool education before kids even get to school, 0 to 5. And I want to support increased funding and support for that kind of thing, not just to attract young people and families, but to help those kids all the way through their lives. That'll get them on a better track than they can be without that. The second part is, when I said I've lived and breathed it, my son works for the company I started. He's a wetlands ecologist who went to UMaine. He moved to Santa Barbara and he came back to live here because he wanted to be in Maine, he wanted to be near family. My daughter, you've already heard about. My stepson served in the Army, did 3 years in the Army and served a tour in Afghanistan. And he was awarded the Purple Heart, and he's back here working in Maine. And my stepdaughter is a physician's assistant, and her husband's an engineer. They're in Florida. He's actually working on hurricane restoration. He's an electrical engineer with Florida Power and Light. They're expecting our first grandchild in January. We're hoping they'll be coming back here. So, and I've also hired people from away because I couldn't find enough of them here as wetland scientists. Just 2 years ago, I hired a young engineer who was from Shapley and went to school in Maryland and met her husband there. He had a master's degree in wetlands ecology. I hired both of them to come back here because I knew I could put them to work. And they've been back here for 2 years living in Waterboro. They've bought a house. My son just this week put a house under contract. So I am innovative. I've started my own company. I'm creative and I'm fun. It might not seem like it tonight, but I am.
So we have one final question, and this one is a little bit different. It says, if you are not selected as the candidate, which of the other people running would you like to see as the candidate? And what will you do to encourage your supporters to work to elect the Democratic primary winner in the general election? And Jim Boyle.
I don't have any coins to flip, so it really, I mean, come on. This is my first time as a statewide candidate. I would have to go with J. Martin Vachon. And I would encourage my supporters to find him and make him show up at one of these.
Mark Eves.
I don't know if I can top that, Jim. That was pretty amazing. For me, I think the most important thing is, I think the second part of your question of making sure that a Democrat is in the Blaine House in 2018. That is the bottom line for all of us in this room and up here on stage. We have to do it. Again, sitting in that seat next to the governor, 4 years of it, it's awful. We have a lot of opportunity in this state. I would vote for Betsy Sweet because it's her birthday, and she'll beat me up if I didn't say that I'm sitting right next to her. So there you go.
And Betsy Sweet.
Yeah. I think, this question's going to be, we're going to get asked this question every single time. And I actually think we should refuse to answer it. Because any one of us would be better than what we have. And it's a way to divide us and to try and divide you. And what we need to do is stick together. Because whoever wins, whatever one of us wins, even if the guy never shows up, we are going to work to make sure that the Democrat gets elected. And so that is our job. And so we need to all work together. We can show people that politics can be done differently. Nasty ads, attack ads, fighting against each other is what make people turn the TV off and get sick of politics and say, I want nothing to do with this. Our collective opportunity is to do it differently. We can speak to the hearts and the minds of Maine people who want to see how we care about each other, not how we tear each other down. And that's our job, and that's why in June, whoever wins, we are all going to be working. Now that said, I think it's lovely that you all got to meet my cabinet. So thank you very much.
Adam Cody.
That's a tough one to follow. Which cabinet would I have? It's a fun question, but the seriousness of this, let's not forget our eye on the ball here, everybody. Great people up here. We all get along. We all genuinely like each other. Let's not forget what lack of party unity has done in the last several elections. And that's not just in Maine, that's nationally. We need to start uniting. We need to start realizing and thinking a bit more about our own personal animosities or small differences of opinion and start recognizing the fact that we have 1 out of 4 kids in Maine going to bed hungry. We have a lot of people really hurting right now, really struggling, and we have had a lot of missed opportunities. I will gladly support whoever gets the nomination. I will work hard for them. I would work my butt off. And we feel strong that we've got a great shot at doing that, but we've got to turn things around in 18. We absolutely positively do. We've got to unite as a party, and we've got to show not only that we can win elections, but we can govern well, because people are hurting out there, and that's the important thing.
Janet Mills.
Thank you. Thanks. The way I see it right now, the most likely Republican candidate is probably Mary Mayhew. We're not doing this. And I frankly think I'm the best person who can take her on. But if I'm not the nominee, I will support whoever at that time I feel is the best candidate, the strongest person to take her on and to win back the Blaine House for our party and for our people. I have always worked for Democratic candidates. I've been a Democrat my entire life. Although I was raised in a Republican family, I know how to work across the aisle. I know how to fight across the aisle. I was trained in that regard. And I know how to work elections and campaign for Democrats all across the state. I campaigned for George Mitchell and Joe Brennan, Mike Michaud, Emily Kane, and so many good people that have come out of our party. So many strong contenders, some won, some lost, but I've always worked for that party, for that person, whether they were the person I supported in the primary or not. I'll continue to do so as long as I live.
Diane Russell.
Can I let you all in on a little secret? You all get to vote for all of us. Think about that. You get to vote for every one of us, and we get to vote for each other. Because that's what changing the election system does. We changed the election system so that we have more voice and so that we can vote our hopes, not our fears. We need to change it for the fall election next year for the governor's race because some folks in the legislature decided that they wanted to preemptively try to sink ranked choice voting, but we are not going to be defeated. We brought this forward, Dick Woodbury and I brought this forward so that we would all have the opportunity to vote for who we wanted to, but also to be able to say, you know what, I like that person first choice, but I think I'm going to go with that person second. You get to vote for every single one of us, and I think that every single one of us is going to vote for the other folks that are on this table. That's a really powerful thing when you put power, economic and political power, back into the hands of the many and take it away from the chosen few, and that's what everybody here is fighting for. So absolutely, we're going to stand here strong with the Democrats. There are a lot of independents that are running. That's great, but frankly, if you want to split the baby, you probably don't deserve to be its mother. And I want to support Democrats. Now with Donald Trump in power, this is not the time to divide people. We have to bring not just Democrats back to the table, but disaffected, unenrolled voters as well, and welcome them back into the big tent that we are, and that's what ranked choice voting will do. So I hope that you vote for every single one of us, and I think we're all going to do the same thing.
So now we're going to give everyone a chance to give their last closing remarks, and we'll